Hey guys, welcome to Eggs. This is episode 104, which means it's our 2-year anniversary. So I need to put some sound effects in there, like
right.
applause.
We need a big applaud or something. That's 2 years of doing this every week, every Thursday.
Yep. So it's kind of a big
times.
deal for us, and because of that, we reached out to a special guest. And on today's show, we have Stormy Simon. Stormy is the former president of Overstock.com, and she is currently on the Cannakids Advisory Board. And she also used to be a morning show producer and on-air personality for Citadel Communications, home of cable and 104.5 The Zone. So we are really excited to have her on, and everyone, please join me in welcoming our guest, Stormy Simon.
Thanks, you guys. Happy
a second round of
anniversary.
applause.
Yeah.
Here's your sound effect.
Yay!
It's your second
There we go.
anniversary.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Stormy, for coming on. Oh, no,
you're-
we've got noise happening.
Look, it's already happening.
I got it here.
Love it so much. You got to play it twice.
That's Mike's fault.
That's
Right.
No, actually, it was my fault.
that is his
So,
fault.
but anyway, yeah, thanks so much for making this happen. We have been trying in one form or another to have this conversation for a couple months now, maybe more. I guess really since last year sometime, right?
Yeah, end of last year.
End of last year.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so really grateful that you finally, that we were able to sort of get all the moons to align and get you in here. So this is a really exciting conversation for us.
Yeah, I love being here.
So cool. So to give you a little bit of backstory on the show, so basically our podcast is called Eggs, and the reason it's called Eggs is that we sort of take people, we look at business people, CEOs, startup entrepreneurs, touring musicians, creative directors, artists, and we sort of analyze the creative thread that runs through all of us and sort of how each of us manifest it in different ways. So, you know, in your case, it might have been in business, where somebody else, it might be in a music career. And so, but what we do is we sort of take apart their process and think about it in terms of coop to table. So moving from sort of the early days to where we are now and where we're headed.
Nice.
And so, and you have a long storied career, an interesting career. So I think it'd be really cool to sort of delve into that a little bit. So maybe let's start at the beginning.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are we talking about the Overstock career or just like career life,
let's start
adult life?
Post high school first thing from there and kind of work our way to now.
Well, post high school, I had a baby.
Okay, there you go.
Like I was holding him post high school and got married right away. Right. The year after I would have graduated.
Okay.
But I was taking a different route. I graduated a little earlier or later because I was going to have a baby. And that's how I started off.
Okay.
And was married and divorced by the time I was 21 and had my second child then.
Okay. So
yeah, so crazy
rocky start.
Yeah.
So did you, coming out of that with kids, I assume college was hard or?
Well, I didn't go to college.
Okay.
So I continued to take whatever untraditional step that there was. I didn't go to college, but I've always been scrappy and determined, and having kids when I didn't, they're never a mistake. So you're not like, oh, I shouldn't have done this. Of course,
the mistake is the dog that you got.
Right. I did. Yeah.
Kids are little.
The 5 dogs I had.
Right.
But it was difficult, but not impossible or insurmountable. And I just started working. My parents were always about going to work and working hard versus, you're going to go to college. I just didn't grow up hearing that. But I grew up hearing that I was capable and that I was smart and that, that you could do whatever you wanted. And, when I became a mom so early and then becoming a single mom, I think there was a lot of fear nipping at my tails. Like I had to take care of these babies and I have to do it. And that's really what was my drive to begin with. Was you had to.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a really important thing to talk about, because I think for a lot of kids, who maybe went a more traditional route, they do have it beat into their head that college is the only way, and if you do this or that wrong along the way, that maybe you're a mistake or you've messed up and there's no future for you or whatever. And so I think stories like yours where you've overcome something difficult, in your case it was having to raise a child at a young age, but I mean, a lot of people have a lot of problems. I think hearing people who have, sort of achieved the levels of success that you've achieved in business and personally, I think those types of things are really important for folks to hear.
Yeah, and once I joined Overstock at 33, I became a single mom at 21. once you've done that for 12 years, you can pretty much do about
anything, yeah.
anything. You make the ends meet. It's like, can I balance a budget? Yes, I can.
Well, that and just scheduling, like his kid's schedule, like soccer with one kid, lacrosse with
Football.
another,
Oh,
football.
yeah, it's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and and I was raised by a single mother too, so I can understand the sort of the struggle. My mom at the time, when I was coming up, was still going through college herself and everything else. She had me a little later in life, but she had gone back to school to get an education and become a teacher, and and I was there through all that and through her working and school and everything and trying to make things work. And, so for all the single moms out there,
Yeah,
that's a tough
kudos.
job.
It's not easy. It's not easy on the kids either.
No, I'm sure.
They learn to do a lot on their own quickly
Yeah.
and rely on the neighborhood moms and,
Yeah. No, it's
things
true.
like that. So
But
it's,
my boys are spoiled to death because they've got the both of us. And so, they can pick their favorite, they can pick their battle, they can pit us against each other, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
I didn't have that luxury, but they do. And so it's interesting, I mean, maybe it's just me being old, I've got the sort of the syndrome that is the uphill both ways, walking to school in the snow kind of thing.
Sure.
So everything was worse for me, right? And so when I talk to them, like everything just seems so weak. Their problems are so, come on, back in my day.
Back in my day, I had to get up to turn the channel on the TV.
Right,
It's like,
right.
I had to actually roll the window down on the car.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, times were tough.
Dial the phone, rotary.
So, what was your first job out of high school?
Well, I worked at Taco Time in high school, which
Okay.
was super fun. And my first job out of high school was at Peter Piper Pizza
Okay.
in Arizona. After
Nice.
that,
Oh,
and I
interesting.
worked in Allen, like a hardware store in Tooele where I grew up, and little things like that. But I would say my first business job, like where I could have started my career there, was in '91 at a place called Best Video, and I had gone in as an administrative assistant full time, which I'd done a lot of part time work in offices, but that was the first time that it was kind
A
of
full-time,
committed
yeah,
and
sure.
had a real boss. Wasn't individually guiding myself or on
Right.
a team, but had to check in with someone every
So
time.
this is sort of like a theory that we've always had, or that I've always had, is I think it's really important for kids to work in customer service early on. Do you think that contributed at all to just your overall success, learning how to deal with the unwashed masses of society, like from your youth?
Absolutely. Like Taco Time was one of the best jobs I ever had because it forced me to interact on different levels at 15 years old. I'd never had to do before. And I think that customer service in any sense was truly the soul of a company.
Yeah.
I built my, a big part of my career off of that. But I do believe that this electronic age is a little dangerous because it allows us, 10 degrees of separation
Sure.
before we actually have interactions.
Sure.
And, the earlier we can start serving people, I think is better for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And, it's something, I mean, a lot of people would downplay jobs at, a Taco Bell or whatever, because it's, doesn't, it's not exactly an illustrious position, but at the same time, I think the lessons learned from time in customer service and like you said, in whatever capacity, will carry them through their career.
Yes, and every job contributes to the wheel, right? So it may not be the most luxurious job, but it's definitely a needed job and a job to be proud of. I love Taco Time. I still go eat those bean burritos. They make everything fresh, by the way.
The half-pound soft taco there is the best.
Yeah, they're cooking the beans in the building. Everything's fresh.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's got a Taco Time card.
Yeah,
Yes, it's greatest. Bean and cheese burrito dipped in enchilada sauce
Ooh,
all
that-
day.
The quesita burrito.
I might
is
have
the
to hit
one.
Oh
them
my
up on the
gosh.
way out of
Quesita
here.
That
burrito.
came out when I worked there. One of the
Yeah.
things I got trained on was making
Yeah,
some
I
of the
haven't been in
first
1,000
casitas.
years because I'm trying to be low carb and all this stuff. I'm trying to
Stop
follow
it.
whatever
Right.
trend I can find nowadays. But
Don't do it.
but the Taco Time doesn't make too many appearances anymore. But it bums me out. I miss them. The half-pound soft taco, that's my jam. I
So,
love that.
how'd you get into radio?
I actually was working in the video place. It was video distribution. So when home video happened, all of a sudden we had this new business where video shops were popping up all over the place. And Salt Lake City happened to be a hub for distribution.
Okay.
There were a couple competitors here, joined one of them, and my job there evolved to be writing radio copy for the new releases that would come out on video. So, movies you even know, but they'd have them write us for our regions. And I started writing radio, and we were buying radio all over the United States, really. And it used to be that classic rock station, 93. Remember the old days before cable 93? And they were just shifting formats and they were shifting teams, and they called and asked if I'd like to come over and be the promotions director.
Nice. So you ran the street team kind of stuff, or?
Kind of, but like I came in and they were changing teams, so nobody really had, their job. So I didn't really know what it was, but those are the things I did. Had to drive the big, cable rider, the big semi truck, and all kinds of crazy stuff there. And then thank God I got asked to be on air and be the producer of the morning show. And
How was that experience?
that was such a great experience. I had so much fun. Every day I'd come in at start at 5:30, so I'd come in at about 5:29.5, sit down in a microphone like this, whip out my makeup mirror and my makeup, and they didn't have video on us, so you could just do your makeup and take the calls. And, I learned a lot about media,
Yeah.
and listening. And
Yeah, it's interesting. The different skills that we've already talked about, early in your career, from customer service to now doing some broadcast work and things like that. Like, it's funny how now looking back, how impactful those things have been on your later career. Everything from speaking at TED and doing, running Overstock and all these different positions. I mean, it all came from being really good at those things or learning those things early on in a career.
listening early. Because I didn't go to college, my education was every time I walked in a room, I had to get something out of it. I realized, every time I walked in a room, I think every person here is smarter than me. So, ears open. And that's how I did it. So I'd go to work as if it was a college course and learning about every piece of it that I could.
I think that's a really interesting perspective. I like that idea of just continued education and continuing to learn and treating your jobs that way.
Yeah, I had gone to the community college for a bit. And what happened was I got that video job in the summertime. I was just going to take a summer job. And those college classes were quite boring. The marketing classes weren't fun and, really cerebral as far as reading and trying to see, put things together that you hadn't experienced. So going into that job and just having done a few business courses where they kind of all came together at that job, just the way the company was structured. Mm-hmm. And I realized that was my type of learning. I've always regretted not going to college, and I'll always feel like that's, I still think I should get up tomorrow morning and do it.
Well, I'm 4 credits shy of my degree, and it's like I stopped going because I was like, why am I paying for this when I can learn it on my own? So it kind of, we've got this theory that like we've interviewed a couple people that have online learning platforms like Team Treehouse and
The
Future with Chris Doe. And we always ask them is like, do you think that the future of education is going to stay the same? Do you think it's going to switch to more of a portfolio base or versus an actual get the degree and go that route? And a lot of them are they're mixed. They depending on the career and the field that you choose depends on if you actually need college or not.
Yeah.
In our profession, I mean, like our portfolio kind of speaks for ourselves. That's our degree. We've got our resume right there, and so it changes things once you are in a creative field like this, I think. So it really just depends on what you're doing.
Well, I think millennials have changed it for us all, right? We were just talking earlier about, they kind of say, I'm going to do what I want and I'll try to make money off it.
Right.
But what I want to do comes first.
Right.
And I kind of like that.
Yeah.
I kind of like that way of living and thinking, we can drive from passion and we do have the ability to make money off of passion and things that we love. And I have to prove that later in life.
Yeah. You're talking to 2 people that have followed that route.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about then sort of your next steps moving into Overstock. Like it feels like quite a leap. So how did that transition come to pass?
Well, I got a few more years of experience at various things in between, but I literally walked into a temp agency, was moving back to Utah from Las Vegas, and went out there for a startup. September 11th happened, and Vegas shut down, and so did the startup. And, I moved back to Utah and was going to go to college, ironically. So I was looking at classes. It was wintertime. It was freezing cold. I move in with my mom. I'm like, this is going to be so great. 6 weeks later at the most. Me and my mom were like, one of us has to go get a job. Like, we can't just be hanging out all day, every day. This is too much. And I went to a temp agency, guided there by a friend. Women had just opened the temp agency. And it was almost like this synchronistic steps that led me right to it.
It's amazing how that kind of works out. Where
Yeah.
Looking back, hindsight 20, that one meeting, that one person, hey, you should go here, you should do that, can completely change the course of your life. And it's amazing how that works.
It's exactly what happened.
So, entry-level position at Overstock?
Entry-level temp position, cold calling businesses to buy bulk, because we would buy 5,000 vacuums and say we might be able to move 2,000 online, let's flip the other 3,000. Stormy and these other people would be calling on the phone while I was going to go to college. So I was like, yeah, I'll call people on the phone. And I just started making these relationships and selling so much that I was the top salesperson. And then within about 90 days, they made me a permanent employee. I decided to stay because I placed an order, and I was obsessed that you could now shop and get like sunglasses in the mail. And I was like, oh my gosh, and they were such a good deal. And it was like I had a secret.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
that's one of those things with Overstock. Like, I think people don't realize how long they've been around, because
Yeah.
they were one of the early guys. You know, I vaguely remember them from the early days of the internet. You know, I mean, you had your Amazon, but still online buying was becoming kind of a, I don't know, it was new, it was novel still. And then Overstock came along and, you know, sort of revolutionized the space in their way. And so it's, I don't know, it's really interesting, you know, to kind of think back to how it was, you know, before we placed every order online.
Oh, yeah. I remember when Google started.
Yeah.
Like when Google became a place that you go, we were AOL, MSN, and Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
I have a buddy that I just reached out to the other day, and I was like, what's your email address? He's like, blah, 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 at Yahoo. And he's like, yeah, I'm not lying. It's still at Yahoo.
It's incredible, right? It's incredible. And Facebook, you know, I was CMO when Facebook came out, and Twitter was the big one for me. I was like, what are we doing?
Yeah. You only 120
And I
characters?
just
What?
couldn't get my head around Twitter. It was like, okay, we have to what? And, you know, it was just, it continued that, you know, the pioneering kept continuing as, you know, the internet or digital marketing or digital interactions became more and more accessible
So,
and mainstream.
CMO, Chief Marketing Officer?
Yeah.
So how did you stay on top of it? I mean, like learning the new tech and knowing what's hot, what should I do? Should I go with Twitter? Should I go with, you know, Google AdWords? Or like, I'm sure you had people that,
Really smart people.
that's usually what comes
But
down to. You
part
just
of
hire
it-
the people that know what you're doing and make sure they.
Yeah, but you couldn't find them. You know, when social media started, we'd be like, we need a social media person. You'd go out in the world and realize it started at the same time for everyone.
Yeah.
There weren't professionals in it, so you knew that you were the professional. But that was my entire career at Overstock was, you know, you show up and it's a blank whiteboard that day because no one's selling anything online. It was Amazon doing books, eBay, which is peer-to-peer. And then Overstock really came in and said, let's sell some vacuums and rugs and really big things. And we did. But you know, there wasn't a playbook. You know, for customer service, there wasn't a playbook on how you serviced millions of people online that you've
Wow.
never met or walked in the door or how to return. And we just figured it out every day. And by the time, you know, I was 7 years in my career when I became CMO. And by that time, I had an innate knowledge of e-commerce and the build, because I do remember before
Sure.
and, you know, coming in and kind of being a part of what made it happen. So by the time Facebook came along, I knew enough about everything else that there might be ways to make it work. And we played super safe and didn't know how to interact as a brand that monetizes off people
Yeah.
in a social space. And what did social mean at the time? And we spent a lot of time just kind of hands off and letting consumers decide what they wanted to do there.
Interesting.
Yeah, because Facebook was free.
Yeah.
Nobody was paying for anything. There were no sponsored ads. You just did whatever you wanted.
Back in the good old days, right?
Yeah, I remember when.
Well, and it does seem that, like, from those early days, you know, the e-commerce online has sort of moved in kind of interesting ways, you know, from where this whole economy of free things, the Facebooks, the Twitters, and having access to all this inexpensive stuff, and then Amazon making everything really cheap, and same with Overstock doing that, and selling these bulk products and refurbs or whatever they were doing at the time.
Yeah.
It made for a really interesting, like kind of Wild West e-commerce land.
Absolutely. When you think of the brick and mortars and how long, I used to think about, I'd use this analogy, like, established companies, brick and mortar companies are like a yacht, right? They're so big and huge. And then we come in on a jet ski and we're like, hey, turn left. And we're like, whoop. And they're like, shifting down 1 degree turn per 5 minutes. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it was a different navigational pole, right? And I remember having conversations with brands and saying, you can just go directly online, and them saying, it just doesn't make sense for us. It took a long time for brick and mortar to really follow. And I still think today there's a struggle in the online experience and the in-store experience. And Nordstrom is doing a good job right now with the pickup in store.
Yeah.
If you go to a Nordstrom, you'll hardly ever find your size, but there's tons of bags to be picked up.
Sure.
And I think it's been a long haul for the real estate retailers to adjust.
Even like the Fred Meyers and the grocery chains that are starting to do that pickup delivery thing. I have a friend that just had a newborn, and she has a 3-year-old too, and she loves it because she just drives up. They load her car. She doesn't even have to take the kids inside, and that right there sells it for her. She's like, yeah, it's a $5, $6, $7 extra fee, but not having to deal with the kids wanting this and that through the grocery store makes up for it. She loves it.
Every time.
Yeah, it's amazing how things change so fast and rapidly. Like I spent some time in the Philippines, and I was gone for a few years, came back, and it was the same time that like the self-checkout lines came to thing. I had never seen those before, and I came back, and I go and I stand up, and I'm just standing there for like 5 minutes waiting for someone to come up. And when they come up, they're like, yeah, you got to do this. I got to do this myself? What? But I mean, in the short space of 2 years, like that wasn't a thing, and now it is. And with the advent of the internet and the online shopping and Amazon, and just in a short period of time, everyone's playing catch up, trying to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because even now, like my background, or I work in marketing and advertising and things like that, and it's funny how many big companies still aren't there yet, haven't figured out what their version of online or what their hybrid of online and brick and mortar is. I mean, it's amazing to me how much space there is, because for people like you and I who've spent a lot of time in this space, like it becomes second nature. You start to understand how the business works and how things work, but then you go talk to somebody about it and they're like, oh, yeah, we still haven't decided on this or what, and it's like, what a weird thing to be, several years into this now. Like, I mean, this has been going on for a while.
Yeah.
And it took you so long to adapt or embrace or, take on this new technology, whichever version of it you need, whether it's on, online e-commerce or if it's just social media and using that as part of your marketing mix, all the way down to with websites and designing them for mobile devices. I mean, every statistic says almost everybody's looking at your website on their mobile, and there's still a significant portion of websites that just don't work right on mobile.
That's the truth. Yeah.
But it's but we've been around it now. It's like, come on, there's no excuses anymore.
And I think that larger companies, not by their own fault, but maybe a little bit, they become bureaucratic. So you've got all these layers, and whether it's you think of the car industry.
Sure.
And how electronic cards are hybrids, and how long it took our players, like the players of America, to really get involved. Tesla came out. I can't remember who. Prius. Prius was the first one. But it was like it still took many years for them to adjust.
Well, everyone was worried, like, oh, if the battery blows up, what do I do? Like, they're used to going in for
if the battery blows up. No, just put some gas in it.
Right? I mean, it's a whole different...
Well, and even just figuring out that technology, it's funny how rapidly that stuff's moving. I know my in-laws bought a hybrid
But it's
car.
always a new company first.
Yeah, right.
It's not an old company. You didn't hear GM going, hey, we just decided we're going to make the electronic car is going to be so great for you. It's always a new company, and then the established ones have to, you
Well,
know, turn their yacht.
Yeah.
I think there's, you know, a little hesitancy on the bigger companies to go and do a significant change like that. You look at like Coke when they did the new Coke back in the day and how big of a flop that was. And like Dunkin' Donuts dropping the donuts and they're just Dunkin' now. And I'm interested to see how that's going to play out and affect their...
I had no idea.
Yeah, they're just
didn't know.
Dunkin' now. They're not Dunkin' Donuts, and their whole, like I heard a radio ad for them the other day, and it just threw me off because you're waiting for Dunkin' Donuts, not
Dunkin'.
it's a whole rebrand,
Just
you know,
Dunkin'.
so it's a little different, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for them.
Well, and to your point about these, you know, titanic businesses trying to pivot, you know, I think, I don't remember the exact number, so nobody text me or anything. But,
Yeah.
but, you know, they say like in automotive, I mean, a car's in the pipeline for 9 or 10 years before it actually gets produced, you know. So, I mean, how agile could you be?
Right.
You know, I mean, it took a long time for like Bluetooth to get into cars. And just now we're coming into this revolution where you can download podcasts, for example, into cars, sort of the way that you would with a TiVo or something. You'll be able to on-demand podcasting because now we can connect wirelessly and all this stuff. But I mean, podcasts have been around for years, you know, nearly 10. And it's like, we're just now getting there in cars.
Yeah.
And
It's interesting. We've been early in some industries.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, your experience at Overstock, you guys were innovating in a lot of those spaces too. So that's, I think, pretty cool that you kind of got to be there for that whole kind of crest, you know.
It was a good ride.
That's
Definitely.
awesome.
How long were you the CMO before you became president?
Well, I went from CMO, that was in 2008, maybe 7 or 8, through 2011. And I moved on to do I had done customer care. I took over customer care in 2006, and it was a great success. And by 2011, we realized we needed that same sort of interaction with our partners or vendors or manufacturers that we were selling for. And so I went on to create a platform that they could interact with us similarly to the way the customers do.
Oh, nice.
And it was pretty slick. And then from there, took on logistics and our warehouse space and opened up a few warehouses and, you know, tried some different programs in that sense, which was completely out of my wheelhouse at the time. Again, I had the innate sense or knowledge of Overstock and the way everything worked. So it was definitely a stretch, but I stepped up and did it, and we did a great job. And then by 2013, I became president.
That's great.
That's great. Well, and what was that like for you? So, I mean, not to get too bogged down in the gender game or anything, but we've had a lot of CEOs on, but you're our first female CEO, really. We've had, you know, some home-based mothers and stuff that have had businesses and things on the show. But, I mean, you were a female CEO in a time when that wasn't everywhere. And even now, it's not really everywhere, but, I mean, you were way ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and I never held the title CEO, although I did run the retail business while the CEO was on other projects.
Okay.
Yeah, president, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah, get it right.
But leader
sorry.
of that division, I get it. And that's a hard question, especially in Utah. And there's a tough thing as a woman. You know, it's interesting. I left Overstock in 2016. And, you know, it wasn't a quick switch where I was like, oh, I'm going to walk away from my baby.
Yeah.
You know, this was a sophomore in high school when I left it. That was my baby.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't an easy decision. And being able to, as a woman, the single mom, the non-Mormon,
Yeah.
I had a lot of things against me here, and, you know, particularly in Utah at that time. Yeah, hard to walk away from after earning it,
Yeah.
you know, and were there punches? Absolutely. You know, any woman that, you know, is my age and has been through a career that I've been through and then says, oh, that's never happened to me, I call bullshit. I just call bullshit.
Right.
I mean, it's just, that's not true. And we talk about, you know, the hashtag Me Too movement, and it's very many different flavors of that. And there's this far end of, you know, holy shit, Harvey Weinstein.
Right.
Like, oh my God, Matt Lauer.
To the minor comment walking down the hall.
Right, to where now there's such sensitivities on these other sides that are like, oh, don't call me sweetie. Well, some people just say that in their home if you're from the South. Or, you know, so there's sensitivities. You know, in the 90s, when I was in my 20s and a young girl navigating through a professional world, yeah, that kind of stuff today wouldn't be tolerated and by myself either. But at the time, I mean, well, what else were you supposed to do?
Right. Well, we had Gina Grad on our show from the Adam Carolla show.
Yeah.
And she talked about some situations that she came into in the radio business back in the day, like contests that they had her do where it was borderline super inappropriate. And back then it was totally fine. Like no one even thought twice. And now I like that it's kind of coming to the forefront where people have to think twice about stuff like that.
Well, it's good to say it hasn't been equal. Mm-hmm. Like it's good to say that out loud, and it's super uncomfortable to say because you can come off as a bra burner, you know,
Sure.
which you could come off as that. And that's, I don't think that's anybody's intention. You know, nobody should have to burn a bra to be equal.
Right.
We were equal the second we got here. But I've also lived in a society where that wasn't true. Mm-hmm. That's not true. And so we have a lot of things as society to work through. And I don't think it's going to be done overnight. But yeah, it wasn't an easy navigation. Don't cry in the boardroom. Don't cry at all. Oh my gosh, you're so tenacious, but he's well-spoken and you're, you know, too loud. And watch your laugh is also one I've heard said to females. But, you know, even the adjectives that we use or were used to describe females were very different than they were used to describe men. Now, is that fair? Sure, if it's true. But we just should be aware. I don't think there are a bunch of men in the world that are looking, well, I take that back. You know, I'm sure the men I've associated with aren't looking to suppress females. I don't think that's their intent. But were we raised in a society where by nature and our history, there was a suppression of females as well as black people and minorities? Yeah, that's the life we just lived. I have 2 white sons. They're white men. I love them dearly, and they are great. They need to be able to succeed in this world, not as a majority, but as an equal.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a great place to see this generation coming and seeing that happening, you know. We're in a good spot.
Yeah, no, I think that's really a nice perspective too, because there are so many people who go too far one way or the other, to demonize men or demonize women, or like there's always somebody kind of pointing a finger. And I think I kind of look at it like a little bit like a pendulum. Like we're trying to get back to the middle. It took us being really bad to realize that we needed to fix it. And then you kind of go too far the other way, and maybe there's some people being accused of things that maybe weren't as big a deal as they were made into. But we'll get back to middle, and then we'll have solved that issue, and then we could move on to the next one or continue working on it.
I think it's just about respect and acknowledgement.
I think that's pretty much what it comes down
to. That's it.
Yeah.
And, we're getting there as a society, and I think it feels good as long as we can love each other at the end of it. Like, I think Trump and, the administration, I don't have a side, but there's been a lot of dividing lately. The Me Too movement divided male and female, which in some cases, it needed to be done. But there's a lot of, people make a mistake or do something and they're ostracized versus accepted back into society. And I think that's a dangerous game that we tend to play, and a lot of it's online. And, like, should Harvey Weinstein go to jail? Probably.
Yeah, based on what I'm hearing, probably.
Yes, right, yeah. Based on what I'm hearing, I don't either. But yes, but should we act as if we didn't love his movies, or that people would have worked there in a split second for Harvey Weinstein and did, and then they found out he was a bad guy and they still did? Like, that was all real life too.
Yeah.
Like, there was a tolerance circle that was very, very big, and many participated.
Well, and that's the thing. I think trying to pretend that none of that part happened is where we've gone too far. Maybe that's where this pendulum has gone out, wide a little bit.
Yeah, we're all broken.
And then as we'll start to come back in, we'll realize, the problems that needed to be fixed or be addressed, and we've let those things out, and we've, aired them now.
Yeah.
And then we can start to get back to normalcy. You've seen so many people or heard so many stories of people's careers ruined or whatever because somebody made an accusation, nothing more, and with or without any backing, they could just go on Twitter and say something, and then it's law, and people have lost careers and things over that. And so I think it's really important to try and be level-headed and sort of, understand that we're a work in progress and we're trying to get better. And as long as everybody sort of subscribes to that notion, I think we will.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. So you work your way up to president.
Yeah.
And you're there for a few years. What made you change your mind and decide to move on? Because that's got to be a hard decision.
It was hard. My mom passed in 2011. I became a la, which means my son had a daughter, and we don't say the G word around my house. And I kind of started reflecting back on how I had spent, I'm a mom at 17, so a grown-up for a really long time and a lot of responsibility at Overstock, and a lot had gone past. Like it was a different place for the company. I think the next stop would have been CEO, and
Too much
not too much, but I mean, as president, just given what, the division of duties were, I kind of had that over the retail side of it, and that's what I did. So it was just the end of it was time. It was time. I was done. I was ready to experience something else. I loved it. What a great opportunity. I made the most of it. I did it. I had amazing success, but I have a life too, and the fear. My parents worked the same jobs for 30 years, and I had a fear of that. Like, oh my gosh. And, I think the idea of another 10 years made me panic. And the idea of having done so much young, like being an empty nester and having, a grandchild in my 40s.
And that's exactly it right there, because you're still young. You're an empty nester when most people still have a 10-year-old, you know, and so you started early, you got out early, so now you kind of have second half of your life.
Yeah, these are like my post-high school years.
It's actually kind of a gift when you look back at it, because, same for me and my wife. We had our first at 24, so, semi-young, not Utah young, but young.
Right.
And, our kids will be out, right as we're getting into our late 40s, early 50s,
Meanwhile, I'll come in with my first, and he'll be laughing the whole way.
Poor Mike will be struggling.
Yeah, but your kids will be more, mentally sound.
But we will have, or I have a friend out in California. He's like 46, and he just had his first, I guess now just his second. So, but I mean, he's going to be 80 before those kids are out of his house, and so, I mean, I look back, and even though I felt like I was really too young probably to have got into the kid game, like, I'm totally grateful for that now. Like, I get to be, young and active with young and active boys. I have two sons, and so I get to do these things.
You're not going to be 65 trying to play football in the backyard.
It'd be like, is your grandpa bring you to school again?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coaching football with them. I'm doing all these things, and it's because I can. When my friend is 61 and trying to help them through football or something, he's probably not going to be all that inclined.
He's going to dislocate a hip. And
I could not have a young child right now under any circumstance. It would just be over.
Yeah.
I just don't have
nice to be a la.
I'm a la, yeah.
I almost dropped the G word. I want to get trouble.
Yeah, we don't do the G word at la-las.
Excellent. I like that. All right, so let's talk about then. You said you were looking for something new. Well, what was it? Where did you go from Overstock?
Well, I made the most radical jump one could make, but I had told myself, if I was leaving e-commerce, would I just enter e-commerce? Like, was I leaving a company or a lifestyle? And they're pretty similarly tied, because a fear for me is becoming, and I learned this from radio. So I got fired from radio.
Oh, really?
But I was like, Stormy, from the morning show, and so I was, your local celebrity.
Yeah.
And then when I got fired, I was crushed. I'm like, oh no, I'm not her. I can't go out. I'm not her. Who am I? So any job I took after that, I was always really careful to protect myself into becoming that title that isn't yours to begin with, because you can be fired. So I tried to protect myself from that. Harder than I thought. But I thought about e-commerce, and I could do whatever I was going to do in e-commerce at Overstock, so I jumped into cannabis. And I literally did it just like that. Like, I said the sentence, and then I decided.
So what was going on at the time when you decided to go that? Because that's it's still becoming okay to talk about, even. Like, people still have that stigma that comes with it. But when you left Overstock and going from something like that to the cannabis field, that had to be like night and day. And then especially in this economy and in this Salt Lake area, was like
Night and day would be easy. It was more like Earth and Mars.
okay.
So I do think it's interesting though that you got into cannabis right at a time not unlike when you got into Overstock, where it was sort of revolutionizing or building a new industry, getting into a whole new world. So I think that's kind of interesting. Maybe that's subconsciously what you're seeking.
That was part of the pull, actually, was the idea that it was just happening. And Denver had recreationally legalized. And I have been attracted to this plant since I was a teenager, and I have no shame in that.
Yep.
I know.
I'm glad that you say that.
Yes.
It's so hard to just be like playing the part and like not acknowledging that it's part of your life.
Well, there's nothing wrong with it. I can't live my life like I'm a criminal when I'm not.
All right.
So this is the plant, and I've associated with it. I didn't know why. None of us have, right? It's just been there. It's been that funny thing as a teenager, whatever. And as I got older, I'm not a drinker. I don't like alcohol. I prefer cannabis over it. And so I kind of kept that was in my life. As it started becoming legal, medicine is coming out, science is backing it, Denver goes recreational, and I am like, oh, this is exciting. We've all read books. We've all done the history on the Prohibition and Al Capone and all the things government did, and fascinating. So I decided I would join, I'm going to look. I go on LinkedIn, search cannabis jobs. One of them's like, easy apply. I click the button, don't think anything of it. A couple months later, they call. I say, yeah, we'll go. 90,000 square foot grow, 2 medicinal dispensaries. And then all of a sudden, I'm exposed to a medicine.
Sure. And
kids with tattoos and skater kids that are taking care of this medicine that moved to Denver in order to have a plant medicine versus the pharmaceuticals that they want to give them for their rheumatoid arthritis at 25 years old, or their Crohn's disease, or their IBS. And these kids are saying, I'm too young for all this stuff. The side effects of this after 20 years is too much.
Yeah.
So they're healers, and they make this trek, change their whole life, and then become healers to other people. So I start meeting patients, talking to growers and how they view this plant. And these are growers that have been growing for years, both markets, black market into this market. And
I have friends that have done both.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness they made it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for them.
Yep.
And, they're looking at it as a medicine. They're not, looking at it like Monsanto to make our tomatoes bigger or different. They're growing it purely. So I learned a lot.
It's amazing how they, I've sat down and he took me through his facility, so I was able to kind of see the process of, nothing to full plant to drying to everything that they have to go through. And they break it down like they'll see the bugs that are on the plant, and they actually have, there's this is in like an aphid or something, and they have other bugs that can go in and attack them. So it's all pure and natural instead of chemicals. And I'm not the one to talk about it, but it's like literally he showed me on a microscope. He's like, see that little thing? We got this guy that can go and attack them. And it's just crazy.
Isn't it amazing?
It's insane. And they go, it's like the plant is a second kid. And he's like, dude, I grew this thing from a seed, and it's pretty cool to have that care and attention to detail.
Well, it's interesting, and it's so contrary to the type of medicine that we take in this country right now.
That's right.
And, I've always been sort of against just, medication, not for any kind of, moral reason or whatever. Just for me, it wasn't my thing. I would do therapy before I took pain medicine or whatever. And so this stuff is really intriguing to me for for a lot of the reasons that Mike was just talking about. Just everything is sort of green and natural, well, literally green, but natural and sort of, of the earth versus, some concoction that they put together to do whatever.
Well, and I think one of the most disturbing things I learned in the quest once I found out it was a medicine, and I'm like, why do we not have this plant? What's the thing? What was it? It was nothing but greed. All politics, all controlled corporate America. For hemp,
the reefer
for oil.
madness back in the 30s.
Right.
Your
suppression
talk at
of
Utah Can last year, props. I really enjoyed your talk.
Thanks. Well, it led a different life for me. Instead of jumping in, and I thought I'm going to make a brand. I'm going to be. It's my dream. I'm going to do this and that. And then what I realized is, it's really hard to do that when there's so many people in prison for nonviolent crimes. And when you think of, the African American community and the Mexican community, I guess would be Latino community, that have been targeted. Like
Specifically for it.
literally
Yeah.
targeted from the 1930s for this purpose.
Well, that's what they branded it as.
Right. It's
you know.
just, it's so disheartening that until our government wants to correct it, instead of line up the pharmaceuticals to get in line to make the big money like we just did, when history keeps repeating itself, I think that's part of the movement. People start to make a stand. And, this is a really unique opportunity for people to get their arms around a medicine. I don't think it happened quick enough. I think the pharmaceutical companies are going to get in and have it. Yeah, I think it's too late, but it was an interesting beginning, and that's what I was hopeful for is, can the states push this so far that the feds have to catch up? Maybe, but I think they're caught up.
I think they started buying out the property and getting the infrastructure set up once they saw the writing on the wall.
Well, and the pharmaceutical companies have put in for patents and IPs over certain benefits that the plant will have over illnesses.
That's insanity.
And, it really is. And it's all good because the science is there and we need plant-based medicine. But I'm not sure who should own the plant.
Right. Well, aren't they getting down to like the real nitty-gritty where they can use blockchain to track the seeds and all sorts of craziness?
Oh, the blockchain is the best. Yeah, blockchain for everything.
Yeah. I haven't done enough research to talk knowledgeable about it, but I've heard that they can track the seeds. Like they can.
Sure.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting when you think of these third, fourth generation farmers, the agriculturalists that have been doing this underground for so many years, but family businesses, that they have IPs that, if they release to the public, they lose control over. So their very own genetically created plants that they really have to protect right now in order to monetize on the big brands and what's coming next.
So that's actually more in favor for the smaller companies, is the blockchain technology like that.
Yeah.
That helps them out more than the, okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, I would say that protecting that IP and the tracking of one particular plant is really important.
So we've talked, I don't know if you are the right person to talk to about this or not, but you probably have some insight on it. The medicinal benefits of hemp and marijuana are there. We've kind of discussed that before with other conversations, but what are some of the other benefits as far as like the nutrition for the fields and the what's the word? The benefits that the crop itself can bring to just the agriculture industry, the farmers that don't have good crops now can have access to a great crop. Just what are other benefits that we're not necessarily thinking about other than medicinal?
Well, I think, textile, hempcrete, this plastic.
Hempcrete is one that that's
amazing.
Yeah.
The first Model T Ford was made with 10% hemp because Ford was thinking about these farmers and thinking, how do I implement this into a new industry? So these headphones maybe could be made of hemp. My outfit for sure can be.
One of the speakers that we talked last year, and like there's a plane made out of hemp. Jay Leno has a car made out of hemp. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But the hempcrete actually has me kind of excited because if you think about it, you can grow your concrete for your house. Right? I mean, like...
if you get to grow it.
Right.
That's where who owns the plant comes in. Like, if you can. But as of today, you can't grow the concrete for your house and you can't grow the lotion for your skin.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it grows like a weed. I mean, it wasn't called weed for nothing.
Right.
If you want the medicinal property punch stuff, yes, you've got to culture it and, nurture it. But as far as, growing out some hemp, I mean, it's grown easily. I'm sure there's better quality. I'm not I know indoor grows. I'm not familiar with outdoor. To the point that I could talk about how it works.
Right. Right.
But, that's a good question. You can grow a tomato.
Yeah.
You can't grow a hemp plant.
Yeah, it's crazy how that is, huh?
It's crazy how much money is going to be made off of that decision.
Yeah, well, and that is what's so crazy is that, we're just letting these, whoever's got the highest bidder, can go in and buy up all this intellectual property and stuff that will then, prohibit our growth or just sort of society's movement into a healthier world.
Yes.
It's really interesting. We talk a lot, not so much on the show, but just like I'm always complaining. I have a small office over in Barcelona, so I spend a lot of time in Spain, and the food quality over there is amazing. Everything is non-GMO and sort of straight from the earth, and it's significantly better. Where here in this country, you might be eating healthy, you're eating a tomato or something, but it's been tweaked and modified and done whatever.
It doesn't
with,
taste like the tomato you grow in your backyard.
Totally different.
Not at all.
Completely different tomato.
And so the idea that by design our country is working against us, now, to keep with this conversation in hemp or in marijuana growth, but really in everything we grow. It's capitalism gone maybe too far. And so it's kind of an interesting world that we're living in right now.
And with this particular plant, we're actually asking for permission. Like, hey, will you own it?
Yeah.
Will you take it from us? And, maybe potentially charge $5,000 a prescription later?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
That's what,
crazy.
There's a piece of me. Yes, I want the science. Yes, I want the healing. I want all of these sick people that can, some people have miraculous experiences simply by introducing cannabis to their lifestyle, when they're sick. Other people don't. But could they with science? Maybe. But how does that look on the other end of it? Like, I want the science, but I don't want the ownership as, these are the people we're asking for pharmaceutical companies to get involved. They gave us OxyContin. We've declared an opioid crisis for I don't know how long. The only thing that's happened in some states is marijuana has come in and opiate deaths have reduced by 25%.
Yeah.
There's no more, you can go analyze that all you want in a laboratory, but that's the only thing that's different. It's not because Trump declared it. It's because cannabis was introduced.
Well, one of the speakers, I keep referring to Utah Can, and it's actually next weekend, the second one, but one of the speakers last time around was a CBD expert, I think from North Carolina. And he came in, he talked about how they use CBD to help people get off of prescription drugs. And essentially what it does is you, instead of taking your normal dose, you cut it in half and you take it with the CBD, and it feels essentially like you're taking your full dose. And so they're able to kind of gradually wean them off of the opioids by using CBD.
Definitely
and
helps.
it's amazing how effective that is, and the benefits of not just the CBD, but the THC and everything that the whole plant axis provides. And I'm excited to see what will happen in the next 10, 15 years, but I'm also nervous too because, Big Pharma could come in and change everything.
Any plant can follow this one. So plant is a plant is a plant. Have we studied carrots to the degree that we should for medicine? I don't know the answer. It might be yes. Have we studied, tomatoes or turmeric, which I think is a huge cancer-fighting agent, just on what I've been able to research on my own. So, the FDA doesn't approve any of the nutraceuticals that we have, right? You go into the GNC, they're not saying, oh, this is true. You take this and you're really going to get the benefits. They can't say that. But this is one of the first plants to enter into the system. And what's next?
Yeah.
Because I know the people are already fighting for more plant medicine. Denver has...
They're passing the mushrooms one right now. Yeah.
Decriminalizing mushrooms.
Which I think is good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's a great thing. This is a great thing. I went to Peru last year and did my own little Eat, Pray, Love trip for a couple of weeks.
Did you do the, what's it called?
Ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca?
I did.
How...
Okay.
Okay.
We have to pivot and talk about this.
Okay, first though, I have to tell you, part of my life changed with this. The man I met healed himself, my shaman, healed himself from the cancer my father died from in 1991, and he healed himself from the earth. So I'm obsessed with this guy, right?
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, what, this guy? And he said, everything that you need to heal yourself is from the earth. You just got to find it. And I've taken those words with me. It's been about 13 months. And I just, it just keeps coming up as relevant. And of course, in the cannabis world, it seems very relevant. But yeah, here's my shaman there. And it shifted the way I thought of the earth supplying us with things.
So let's talk about that kind of experience as a whole then, because this is really intriguing to me. I mean, normally like the Joe Rogans of the world get these people that have done this. So I'm curious to hear about it. I mean, I guess sort of what inspired the trip? Is it just your general, interest in sort of earth-based medicine that sort of inspired that, or were you trying to overcome
The
something?
road to 50.
Okay.
I mean, the road to 50 and then some friends going and, that just...
If you could go back 15 years and do it then, would you have, I mean, like, do you see a benefit of doing it then, or was that the
Hell
perfect
no.
time? Okay.
So what they believe in Peru, and these are very ritualistic rites of passages that are not done, for a psychedelic rush. They're done with intent and purpose. So people could relate it to a religious experience or a religious thing that they want to do.
That keeps coming up over and over again.
Yes. So it's a rites of passage, and I had to be in my state of mind, to understand all of that. The other thing that people say a lot is it's called Pachamama, the ayahuasca plant. So it's of Mother Earth, and it's got this female energy. And they'll say, oh, she'll call you, right? So people say they're called to it. And I didn't know much about it until I got called. Then I was like, what is this? And why am I pulled to do this? Why am I so quick to say yes? And what's going on? Read a little bit about it, just enough of the older text, not like people that are going to Peru and going in a group and into a chapel.
Yeah, not the new modern tourist version of this, but the older version.
The purpose. What was the purpose? What were people actually doing, and why has it been around for thousands of years? And I found that interesting, and I went all in. I mean, I did every practice, meditation, the yoga, the cleansing of the diet, the vegan. I just did all of it for the full, the full purpose that it was intended for, at least when it was started thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm. That's neat.
And
yeah,
so can you talk about, I mean, you don't have to get too personal, but I mean.
What happened?
Yeah. But can you talk a little bit about about the experience? We don't need to know about any, buckets you had to carry around or any of that kind of stuff necessarily, but I think it'd be interesting to hear.
I would summarize this, that it was a unique experience, and I try not to share it because I think it's that unique for everyone.
Sure.
And I wouldn't want to influence somebody because we were in a group of 11 and everyone had very different experiences, and I think that by talking about mine or giving an idea of what it might be like for someone isn't the best, because it's really whatever you need it to be at the time.
I'm sure it's kind of like waking up from an awesome dream and not writing it down and then trying to remember it like a week later. Same kind of.
I remember every single
Really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've actually heard that it's such a profound thing, but like you're saying, it's very unique for individuals, so whatever it is you're trying to work through, the visions or the however you want to describe them, sort of the optics part will try and carry you through whatever it is you're trying to overcome.
Yeah.
So whether it's a journey of aging or just overcoming loss and problems in life or depression or whatever it might be, as people take it, the experience is sort of custom to their need.
Yeah, and it's not for everybody all the time.
Sure.
And I do know people that'll go take it and they're I don't know, once a month or something. I didn't have that type of, I don't know if I would ever do it again. But what I got out of it was so profound for me that it was well worth it.
That's
cool. I wouldn't suggest, someone just running and doing it, but maybe that's for them. They should do it however they want. But
well, I think the guided path is the way to go. Instead of just, hey, you got a homie that's got something, hey, try this. You don't do that. The guided...
Well, I think the word you used was intent. It's all about, sort of properly framing the whole experience, and getting your head into the spot where you can actually be treated by the medicine versus, doing it for tourism or to go with a friend or, whatever it is. This is a big internal thing that you're working through. And so the purpose of this medicine is to help carry you through that or help you resolve this purpose.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to frame it that way.
It was a week long in the retreat, and one of the most substantial weeks of my life, you know, but it was my eat, pray, love. You know, you're there by yourself, you're in it, and I was there just for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
And
really
that
great.
felt good too.
So, your company right now, is it your company?
No.
Okay.
Not cannabis. I've done a few things in the cannabis world.
Sure.
One of them was work with a blockchain company that provides banking within dispensaries where you can take debit card and credit cards.
Well, that's a whole another thing right
amazing,
there. Yeah.
Amazing company. I was with them for 6 months. Canna Kids, been working with them since 2017. An amazing story. Happy to share that. And then I'm on the board of High Times.
Okay.
And I do some work with High
So
Times.
is it Angela Bachman, or one of the
Do
writers?
I know Angela Baca?
Yeah.
Yes, I know her,
she's
but
one of
not
the
through
writers.
High Times.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Doesn't she a contributor for them?
I don't know. She could
I think
be.
she writes
She's a
for
great
them.
writer. Yeah.
But sidetrack.
Yeah.
So, what is Canna Kids? What's the mission behind Canna Kids?
Yeah, Canna Kids is actually a for-profit product that's focused on delivering cannabis as a medicine to both pediatric and geriatric patients, but of course it's for everyone. But Canna Kids was founded from savingsophie.org, and Sophie is a human, a little child. She's 6 years old, and she was diagnosed with a glioma optic. I think I said it right. Probably not. I should after this much time. Tumor in her brain, and her mom, Tracy Ryan, one of the strongest women I know, and her dad, Josh, Sophie's dad, Josh, were kind of freaked out by chemo on an 8-month-old baby.
Understandable.
Started exploring other options, started going down the cannabis route with force and determination, and started having successes. And Sophie's tumor would shrink. It's been a 6-year journey. They're well down the path. They have hospitals now engaged to start doing this research with cannabis and cancer. They have a piece of Sophie's tumor alive in mice to begin researching on that particular type of cancer. Because when you think about this, babies aren't born with brain tumors.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
So when they are, the amount of research you can get done off this one little human in order to make it better for other little humans you're not going to get a lot. There's so many variations in what these babies go
So
through.
they cut out a piece of her tumor.
They were taking it out, and Tracy fought for the right for that and had it shipped, I think, to Israel. But she's a badass.
Isn't Israel one of the better as
my
far as like the knowledge behind the plant? They're like one
Absolutely.
of the best
Well,
places.
they're allowed
go.
to test it, right? Because here we
Yes.
still can't test because it's still Schedule 1, right?
Well, we
So,
can
like,
test, but the
medicinal
government won't
studies aren't-
acknowledge it as a test.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it can be done.
But we're getting a lot more info from like Canada, and because of
Yeah.
of that, and Israel's contribution to it.
Yeah, I mean, Canada just came in and kicked our butts on this.
Yeah.
Everybody, all of the companies are going there to go public, and that was a good decision on their end, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So it started from Sophie was her name?
Yeah.
Okay, so it started from that website and evolved into Canna Kids.
Saving
So-
Sophie's a nonprofit. That's the nonprofit part. So really dedicated to research and then making sure that children who may benefit from this medicine has a resource in which they can talk to a nurse about it, or you can go online and speak to a nurse, ask questions for those that are curious.
Yeah.
Well-
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, it's probably important for organizations like that to exist, though, because, like, for people with kids, cannabis might not be your number one. There's a lot of stigma attached and, sort of misinformation and stuff floating around in the ether. You might not think, this is the right thing for my child right out the door. And so I think it's important that people like this are advocating on behalf of CBD or the plant or whatever it is their focus is, and cannabis for children, because I don't think a lot of people would go there as their first one. I mean, it took desperation in the case of Sophie.
I think it's interesting, right? Because those are folks that show their kid on YouTube after they get their wisdom teeth out, and they're like, "Hey," and they're funny.
That was trendy
like,
for
they're
a while.
Funny.
I'm so glad phones weren't out when I got that done, because I would.
But they say like, "Oh, the child has cancer. Doesn't that get him high?" And it's like, define high.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Like,
Is it better
define
than-
high.
Yeah.
I don't know, but if it fights cancer,
Yeah.
Well,
and
so
isn't it better than whatever
but we're,
toxic component
we
we're giving those
video
kids anyway?
high.
Yeah.
And then we say, well, that's legal. Well, okay. But it's still a form of kids being medicated and having an altercation on their
Sure.
mental state.
Right.
So I compare it to that. Like, do you take away that numbing agent to get your molars pulled and, that gas or whatever it is that makes us so high when that happens?
Yeah.
Would you take that away and just do it cold turkey, just rip them out because I don't want to be high? No, of course not.
Well,
There's a benefit to that.
Right.
And with the plants, actually a medicinal benefit. It's not just a numbing benefit.
Well, it's not like they're using it just to get the kid high. They're using
Right.
it to address a problem. Landon's story is one that I kind of referenced before, and his story is really unique to me because I think they moved to Colorado, and then the state was trying to get him off of marijuana and back onto chemo, and it was a huge legal battle with that. And that to me is just asinine, the fact that he's got something that's working and we're going to take him away and put him in foster care and make him go back on chemo. And a huge legal battle, ended up moving to Portland, just nightmare of a situation. And if that's kind of what Canna Kids is about, is helping people like that, props.
Well, yeah, and there's many. There's Canna moms. There are moms that are working to get medicine to children in states that they don't have access to it. But Canna Kids is actually about a product.
Okay.
And it's saying it's risky, right? Canna Kids.
Yeah.
Well, it was
same
funny
thing.
because I went to your website,
Yeah.
and I go to it, and I'm like, cannakids.com. Are you over 18? Because the thing pops up, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of counter,
Right.
yeah, intuitive. So it's like kind of, it's sad that disclaimer has to be on the site when really you're trying to help kids in need,
But it is, a testament to Tracy's determination in saying, no, it's Canna Kids.
Yeah.
It's for kids with cancer.
Yeah.
That's what it started as. And she's held firm to that. We shouldn't have a stigma in regards to what science is proving to be true.
Yeah. Well, I think Landon was the youngest medical card holder in history, I think.
Is that right?
Yeah, I
Was
think
he the youngest?
The first one, I think he was like 4 or 5 when he got it. And
It's
then
amazing.
It's crazy. Well, and then like Doug Rice's daughter, same kind of situation. It's just, if there's a need, we need to address it. And if chemo isn't working or there's a better solution.
Well, even if it is, we have to have a choice. There's a predetermined way that we medicate ourselves, and it has nothing to do with our opinion.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with our voice. It only has to do with, the way it's set up. And I have a problem with that personally. So I try to be the voice in my medical care. Am I grateful for Western medicine? Yes. If I have cancer, will I be doing chemo and cannabis? Yes. I'll never turn my back on it. But to just say we're right, this is the pain pill you will take, even if it kills you. But you're going to do it. But if you want to do cannabis, we'll take your kid, we'll come after you. To me, that's a broken system. And this plant has exposed that for me. It's been through the process of understanding this plant and kind of its suppression and prohibition and all of the people that benefited from that prohibition. It's kind of exposed that maybe sometimes, we shouldn't just take what we get, but we should rethink it. We were talking about how do you get GM to make an electronic car?
Yeah.
Well, somebody else has to do it. And maybe the people are on the jet ski right now and the government's still in the pharmaceutical Titanic.
Yeah.
And we're on a jet ski saying I think we can do better. Maybe it's going to disrupt the system. And my hope is that it does, because we do have choices. If we can get science to back it, you go to Peru, they'll tell you 1,000 different choices. And a man that lived, my dad did chemo. He didn't live. This man didn't and did. Why is that? Might work
right.
for one and not the other, but the science needs to be more earthly point.
Yeah. Why aren't we
pointed
at
towards
least exploring it?
Right.
Yeah.
Why aren't we exploring it? And why, when we do want to explore it, do we punish people or make them leave their homes or, whatever it is? And I get the controversy of cannabis. I'm on the far end of that spectrum to just say, I'm going to advocate for it, even if it's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a nice little full circle moment back to what Mama was saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. So I guess to sort of wind down, we're getting sort of to the end of this thing. What does the future look like for Stormy? What are you working on these days, and you know, what do you hope to do in the future?
I'm actually working on a podcast.
Oh, excellent!
There you go. We
Hey,
might
we
be
know
able to-
people
yeah.
you can
I
talk
know.
to.
Yeah, you know a guy. I know a guy that knows a guy. Yeah, and I'm working on that, and that's been really fun trying to get creative and figure out what to do.
Have you done any episodes? Or is
No, nope.
It's that fresh.
It's that fresh, but I have a name.
Oh, cool.
What's it going to be?
The Tribe Talks.
I like
Ooh.
it.
Yeah,
I like
the
it.
Tribe Talks. And I'll keep a surprise what it starts off with, but
Okay.
All right.
it'll be
perfect.
fun. And
Well,
I'm hoping to get it launched this summer, but I'm not.
Excellent. Well, not to do too many self-righteous plugs, but yes, of course, we can help facilitate some of that. If you
I'd
need
love to
it.
have you guys on.
Let's wrap.
That'd
So,
be great.
all right. Well, where can people find you, Stormy? Where can they learn more about what you're doing, where you are, if you're speaking in places, things like that?
Well, my social media accounts are pretty much where I'm at these days, and they're all under Stormy Simon, so it's
Okay.
easy to find me. And then, I'll be around doing the stuff with cannabis. I love it. Please educate yourself. There's one thing that I can ask listeners when they have an opinion about the plant. Just educate yourself on the science that has been done, and don't be afraid of what your parents told you.
Right.
Like, don't be afraid of that. Like, we've been wrong a lot as humans, and this may be one time just to look back and readjust something we may have thought this entire time that isn't true, and then jump on the bandwagon.
I love it. So cool. All right. Well, thanks to everybody who tuned in on the live stream. Everybody who will ultimately be hearing this show, our second year anniversary. So that's really exciting. And if you have questions for Stormy or anything, look her up on social media, and we'll go from there. So thanks again, Stormy. We really appreciate your time, everything.
you.
Mike, everybody,
Thanks.
and have a great week.
You guys too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Take care.